Hey there. Hope everybody is doing well. I hope you had a good Halloween. Hope you had a good weekend. Hope you had a good whatever. Um, so we have moved into the literature portion of the course. I'm excited about that. Some of you are excited about that. Some of you definitely are not. And that is okay. We'll get through this. So, first things first, I am still working on observation reports. They take a while, they're long. Sorry. But I should have those wrapped up in the next day or two. So sorry that's taking me a little while. Overall, I'm seeing a lot of good content, a lot of good time and effort put into these, and I really do appreciate that. So now we're into literature. So I started you off with a short story to kind of let you dip your toe in. You've got two stories actually from the same author, Flannery O'Connor. Let me try that again. Flannery O'Connor was a writer in the South in the 19. She wrote primarily, I believe, in the 1940s and 50s into the early 60s, if I recall correctly. I'm a little bit rusty. I studied her a lot in graduate school. I focused pretty heavily on Southern literature. So I read a lot of Flannery O'Connor, read a lot of William Faulkner, read a lot of those authors. So I started you all with short stories because students get really apprehensive about poetry, and I understand why. A short story, you have a lot more to work with. You may not have to go as far with in-depth analysis and trying to figure out what the author's trying to say. So I wanted to start you there. So let's see, we had everything that rises must converge. The story about Julian and his mother and her hat and the incident on the bus and what followed. The story you had this week is Revelation. Revelation is a great study on setting, a great study on character. There is a lot to look at and work with in that story. And then, of course, you had poems. I had you read The Emperor of Ice Cream by Wallace Stevens. It's a favorite poem of mine. It's one of the first not short poems that I memorized. First read it at governor's school when I was 16 years old. So Wallace Stevens is an interesting character. He was a really normal guy. I think he was an insurance salesman, lived in Connecticut, took really long walks. You hear a lot of stories about poets and writers being really weird, and Wallace Stevens was just really normal. The things that were unusual about him, he took really long walks. Apparently, if he asked you to go on a walk, you didn't know if you would be back before nightfall. And he would very occasionally go down to Florida and have too many drinks and get into a fist fight with Ernest Hemingway. Ernest Hemingway would win the fist fight, but I digress. Anyway. The Emperor of Ice Cream is a poem that really interested some of you and really vexed some others, and I understand that response. So I'm going to talk a little bit about our readings today, obviously. I'm going to talk about theme. I'm going to talk a little bit about literary analysis. But I also want to put out there, if any of you want to have a discussion on the literature we've been reading, let me know. I'm glad to send out a doodle poll and find a good time. I do some collaborate sessions with my other classes. If you all are interested in that, I would love to have a literature discussion, to ask questions and bounce ideas around. So then there was a love song of J. Alfred, yes, the love song by T.S. Eliot. And it's long. Another poem that there was a pretty even split in the class on people loving it, people hating it, people liking it, but not quite being sure. So Eliot was a very popular American writer in the early half of the last century. He did move to Europe later on, and he wrote a lot of really important poems. This is one of them. The Wasteland is one of them. His work tended much more religious later in life. Four Quartets is a popular writing that a lot of the fans of his later work really love, and it's a really lovely piece. It's long, it's very long, but a very lovely piece to read. And then Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. This one is one that I know a lot of people have read before. I know a lot of people have read Dickinson before, so this isn't entirely new. Her style is very recognizable. The dashes, the capitalization, her approach to death, which I find to be refreshing. You know, that she approaches death with curiosity and kind of a lighthearted approach versus, say, somebody like Edgar Allan Poe, who's going to make it, you know, dreary and super gothic. So, anyway, I encourage students to read the work first, then do some research on the writer, and then come back to the work, or do some research on that literary period. Often we find with these works of literature that they reflect what's going on in the period, and it can often be hard to see that when you're in the middle of it. But when we look back on these historical eras, we can see a lot of the anxieties, a lot of the concerns, a lot of the trends, a lot of the issues reflected in the writing. So I'll talk about that a little bit more next time. I will mention that the stories you're reading for this week are very heavy on symbolism, and the things they carried is a pretty heavy story in general. So we'll talk more about symbols in the next video. One thing that I definitely wanted to talk about today are the critical lenses. You have the little short reading on literary theory, the theoretical perspectives. When we talk about these perspectives, you're basically considering them to be angles from which to view a text. So if we talk about viewing something from a historical perspective, viewing something from a feminist perspective, whatever. I'm not telling you to change your beliefs in that moment. I'm telling you, hey, consider how this might look if we put this particular thought in our head. How might this look to someone coming from this other perspective? How might the writer have been trying to say something from this perspective? Let's see. To give you an example, a feminist reading of Because I Could Not Stop for Death by Emily Dickinson. And I'm not pulling this out of thin air. This is something that literary critics have written about, is that she is likening marriage to death. The woman getting into the carriage is wearing gossamer and tulle, light, flowy white fabrics. While it sounds like she's wearing a nightgown, also kind of sounds like a wedding dress. And she's getting picked up and moving on to her next home. So some people have likened this poem to a sort of a critical view of marriage. So just one example. You can look at Flannery O'Connor's writings from a historical perspective. What are they saying about what was going on during the time that she was living? What are they saying about this time, when segregation was ending and racial tensions were high? How is that reflected in the work? So just give those theories some thought and play with them and practice with them. With literary analysis, you're figuring out what a text says, what it means, and why it's important beyond just standing alone as a text. And that brings me to theme. So when we talk about a theme of a work of literature, we're talking about a message. And one point that I really want to drive home is that a theme is a complete statement. A theme is a sentence. A theme is a full idea. Think of a theme like a thesis statement. And to give you an example, love is not a theme. Okay, you can't, if I say, what is the theme of Romeo and Juliet, and you say love, no, we need a complete statement. What is it saying about love? If I say, Because I Could Not Stop for Death, what's the theme? And you say, death. That's not a theme. That's just a topic. That's an area. So when you consider the theme of a work, when you consider what that author is saying, when you consider what that piece of literature is saying, make it a complete statement. So if you keep coming back to just that idea, death or love or sadness or whatever, think about what it is that the piece is saying about that. Love, not a theme. Love will destroy your life. That's the theme. Just an example. I'm not that gloomy today, I promise. So keep that in mind as you move forward. So what I want to know from you all, what do you have questions about? Do y'all want to have a collaborate session to have some literature discussion? Can you tell that I'm just like starved for seeing students and talking to them? Some of you have noticed I'm like overeager when I meet with you and collaborate. I'm like, hey, a person. Let me know what questions you have. Let me know what you need help with. If there's a particular theoretical perspective that doesn't make sense from what you've read or you don't understand how to apply it, let me know. And all of those aren't going to be applicable, okay? We're only reading a few pieces of literature, and you may go, I don't see how I can look at this from a new historicism perspective. Okay, fine. You don't have to work with that. And I'm not asking you to apply any particular one, but I do want you to think about them and process them. I also want to remind you that whenever we say literary criticism, we don't mean we're talking bad about literature. We're analyzing, evaluating, and thinking about the literature. So I'm going to stop there because I've talked for a while and I'm running on and my video's gotten long. Please let me know what questions you have. I'm going to be getting back into checkpoints and checking in with everybody here soon. If you are struggling with the literature essay assignment, you're not quite sure what you want to write about, let me know. Drop into office hours, send me an email, set up a meeting, use the Writing and Reading Center. Any of these things can help. A conversation may get you moving in the right direction. I hope y'all are having a wonderful week. I hope everything's going well for you. If I can help you at all, please let me know. Y'all take care.